The sound of splintering wood echoed through the hallway, followed by the horrifying guttural groans of the undead. Oliver froze, getting up from the king-size bed of the presidential suite he was lounging on, his hand immediately reaching for the dagger waiting for him at the nightstand. All the other weapons he had accumulated were also at different spots inside the presidential suite, readily available to Oliver. He only needed to extend his hand to grab the machete, sword, and gun. He knew they were inside. The zombies had certainly breached the hotel, their presence all around him. He had already known this day was bound to come. No matter how secure he managed to make the hotel, no matter how many barriers he had built, these zombies were relentless creatures. They always found a way in, no matter how secure the place was. Despite that, Oliver was not panicking. Having spent 5 years dealing with these creatures in the post-apocalyptic world, he was both trained and ready for anything and everything. He had planned for this already, and he knew if he only played it smart, he could get through this. He had spent months preparing for the moment when the hotel would no longer be safe, the sanctity and peace ruined by the arrival of the zombies. And now, the moment had finally arrived. Oliver sprinted down the corridor, his boots barely making a sound on the plush, thick carpet. The only reason he had chosen this hotel for his safe space was the fact that the top floor had not been looted and appeared in perfect condition. Hence, he had directly come to the presidential suite and had turned it into his sanctuary, a fortress within a fortress. But it wasn't just the safety of the suite which kept him alive, but also the network of escape routes he had created on the top floor, the hidden doors and corridors that allowed him to move through the hotel easily and completely unseen. And then there was the roof, his absolute and only lifeline. The roof was where he had somehow managed to grow food in the form of vegetables, fruits, medicinal plants, and crops. The apocalypse had taught him everything. It was also where he had found a broken motorized hand glider, which must have been for the hotel residents' recreation before the apocalypse. Oliver, being an engineer, had been overjoyed at the find and had worked tirelessly to put the glider in working condition again. The motorized hand glider now stayed tucked away on the roof, and Oliver knew it would prove to be helpful in these conditions. The roof was definitely his only way out, and if the zombies out there were way too many or entirely undefeatable, all Oliver would need to do was get to the roof. After that, everything would be in his favor once again. But before that, he needed to see how many of them were inside, and how hungry did they appear. Despite everything, Oliver was ready. Oliver had found this hotel about 6 months ago, when he had randomly happened upon this part of the country on accident. After 5 years of the apocalypse going by, almost everyone who had still managed to survive had built a survival strategy for themselves. Oliver's strategy was simple. All he did was move around from place to place, looking for safe shelter. At this point, he had probably seen the entire country, running from place to place. Finding the hotel had been unexpected and surprising, especially since Oliver had not gotten a proper shelter in weeks. The entire country had been overrun years ago, the streets now filled with zombies and buildings reduced to rubble. But the hotel, a towering 5-star luxury resort, was mostly intact. That was what had truly surprised Oliver, because in the world he lived in, finding buildings which were still standing was not entirely easy. When he had entered inside, the lobby was brimming with a group of zombies, but Oliver had fought them through. His machete in one hand, with his dagger in the other, he had dispelled all of them, throwing them out of the doors and closing all windows and doors behind him. He looked around the entire building carefully, but it had been deserted. Heading straight for the top floor, Oliver had reached the presidential suite, which was entirely untouched, a relic of the old world. The furniture was pristine, the minibar fully stocked. The bathroom was still filled with expensive toiletries that Oliver had forgotten even existed. It was a palace in the middle of a rotting wasteland, and he had been ecstatic at coming across it. But he wasn't naive enough to just move in and call it a day. He knew better than trusting an unprotected building. He had in fact worked night and day to turn the suite into a fortress. He worked all alone to barricade the doors, reinforce the windows, and set up traps to deter intruders. The traps were mostly for the zombies, but he wished to deter any other survivors as well, if they chose to enter the hotel. This was his fortress, and he wanted to keep it that way. But he hadn't just ended it at that. He had also created a massive network of escape routes, using the interconnected hotel rooms to his advantage. The storage room on the top floor was replete with supplies and tools which he had used for his project, and by breaking down walls to create hidden passages, Oliver had tried to secure an exit for himself. The hidden pathways allowed him to move through the hotel without being seen and directly reach the most important place in the entire building, the roof. The roof was Oliver's pride and joy when it came to the hotel. He still did not know how he had managed to turn it into a garden using the pots and seeds available. He had managed to grow vegetables, fruits, medicinal herbs, and even crops such as rice and corn. The roof already had a broken greenhouse where a rainwater collection system was established. Using everything he had learned at university during his engineering degree, Oliver fixed the system to give water to his own plants and set up a solar panel array to power his tools and gadgets. But the crown jewel of the roof was the motorized hand glider. The glider, which had clearly been usable and functional once, was now broken, but it was sleek, a beautiful lightweight contraption which was designed for recreational use. Oliver had spent weeks modifying it, adding a small motor and extra fuel to increase its range. The glider was his ultimate escape plan, his way out if the hotel was ever compromised. And now that the hotel had once again been invaded by zombies, the plan was being put to test. He quickly glanced through the corridors of the top floor and noticed that the zombies had still not reached there. He returned to the presidential suite and slammed the door shut behind him, his heart pounding loudly in his chest. Listening closely through the door, he could hear them in the hallway, their guttural groans growing louder with every passing second. He knew they were coming closer, perhaps able to smell his human scent. He did not have a lot of time. Quickly running to the large walk-in wardrobe, he grabbed the backpack, which was already packed with supplies, and slung it over his shoulders. Oliver kept the bag packed with everything he might need if he had to run away and restart elsewhere, and he knew this was one such moment. Sighing deeply, he opened the hidden panel in the wall, revealing a narrow passageway that led to the adjacent room. Moving quickly through the darkness with the help of his flashlight, Oliver remained careful not to tip the zombies about his location by making any sounds. They had excellent hearing, and this was the last thing Robert wanted. The passageways were narrow, cramped, and dusty, but Oliver knew they were safe, and he trusted them completely. He had spent weeks creating these escape routes, breaking down walls and reinforcing the structure to make sure they won't collapse. But to ensure even greater safety, he had also set up traps along the way, which included tripwires connected to flares and oil slicks that could be ignited easily. He even had a few handmade explosives, which he had planted at different intervals. He knew firing these traps would ruin the entire structure of the hotel, but he would do anything for his own safety, even if it meant destroying his only sanctuary. He had actually hoped that he would never have to use these methods, but now he was grateful for the foresight and the planning. He had done the right thing. As he moved through the passageway, Oliver's mind raced. He had always known the hotel was not going to be a permanent solution, and he would need to run elsewhere someday or the other. Hence, he was at least not sad. The zombies sounded erratic and relentless, and Oliver could hear the sounds of things breaking and feet stomping. It was true he had hoped to stay here a little longer and perhaps manage to grow enough food to stockpile it for supplies and later use. But there was a bright side to everything. It was difficult enough to carry the heaviness of the backpack he was currently holding. It would have been mostly impossible to carry any more food with him. Now, he would have to leave everything behind, including the suite, the garden, the hotel, and the semblance of a life he had managed to build in this part of the country. But he was not going to let his sadness make him give up. He needed to reach the hand glider. That was his only way out. Oliver finally reached the end of the large passageway and pushed open the hidden door, emerging into another hotel room. He could hear the zombies in the hallway, their claws scraping against the perfectly wallpapered walls on the corridors. It pained him to see this old relic of time being destroyed by their heinous methods, but he did not have the time to stand and mourn, or even try to stop them. Ignoring everything, he sprinted across the room he had reached into and opened the door, which led straight upstairs to the roof, the cold night air hitting him from the opening like a slap. He was just about to step upstairs when a loud rumble from the passageway reached his ears, and he knew. The creatures had found the passageway. Taking a deep breath, Oliver returned to the end of the passageway and ignited the switch on the walls, which linked all of the traps he had together. He knew he only needed to push a single button for all the traps around the hotel to fire up and scare away the zombies. As much as he had wished to avoid it, it was definitely necessary to draw them away from him. It would take him a few minutes to put the motorized hand glider into position and fly away using it, and the zombies reached him before that. Escaping would be impossible. Their footsteps came closer, and without any further delays, Oliver pressed the button, a loud explosion sounding somewhere in the hotel. A bright orange flame appeared in the darkness of the passageway, and Oliver felt relieved to see that the plan was set in motion. He ran back to the opening which reached the roof and stepped on the spiral staircase, closing the door behind him. He sealed it. Quickly taking 2 stairs at a time, Oliver finally reached upstairs, noticing how the roof was a perfect balance of planters and equipment, the vegetables and herbs growing on one side as they swayed in the soft breeze. The streets below were deserted, and every building around him was broken entirely. Oliver ignored everything else and ran straight towards the hand glider, which was safely docked away inside a small compartment shed, parked near the edge of the roof. He took the glider out, surveying it from every direction to make sure there were no damages. He always kept it fully ready to fly, and today was no exception. The tank filled with usable fuel. The tank was dull, and he knew it was enough to get him out of the city, or perhaps even further if he tried. But he would have to move quickly through it all. He was just about to strap himself into it when the rooftop door was thrown open, the zombies venturing inside. Oliver's eyes widened, not having expected them to reach him this quickly. He breathed in deeply, still not panicking. It had been a long time since he had been this close to one of these creatures, or had to fight them one-to-one. The hotel had kept him safe, but they had clearly followed him through the hotel, their twisted forms shuffling straight towards him. Oliver did not hesitate for even 1 second, knowing exactly what he needed to do. He left the glider by the edge and ran towards his shed again, bringing out the handmade explosives he had stocked there. Firing up the explosives, he threw them at the zombies and tried to slash a few of them with his trusted dagger. He had no desire to fight them all off or kill them before he went. He just needed to create enough diversion to make his escape possible. Once the zombies were absorbed in the thick of the blast, Oliver strapped himself in the hand glider, ready to take off. But just then, a few of them ventured past the blast, running straight towards Oliver. A loud explosion sounded from inside the hotel, and the back part of the building began to fall, forcing all of them to turn around and see what the matter was. Oliver breathed in deeply, watching how serious the situation was becoming. In just a few seconds, more bombs were going to explode right underneath him, taking the entire hotel down. Oliver had no plans to die, and especially not through the traps he had set up himself for intruders. He needed to escape. It was now or never. He took out the gun from his inside jacket, which he only saved for emergency situations, and aimed it at the zombies heading straight towards him. He knew if he did not kill them, they would hang on the glider to follow behind him, and Oliver could not afford that right now. It would destroy the glider, and this was his only escape route. Taking a deep breath and aiming as perfectly as he could in the chaotic, panicked situation around him, Oliver fired at the first zombie, and he fell down, dead in a single instant. The other two zombies running towards him were met with the same fate, and Oliver finally breathed a sigh of relief. Tucking the gun back inside his jacket, Oliver started the motor, whirring the hand glider to life. He was immediately relieved to see that it was working, and within seconds, he was flying off the roof, away from the hotel. A very loud explosion reverberated through the street just then, and as Oliver turned around, he could see the hotel dissolving into rubble. The zombies were still on the rooftop, and many of them were still inside the hotel, and he knew they would fall down with the hotel, dying instantaneously. That was exactly what Oliver had aimed for, even if destroying the hotel had been a difficult decision for him. As he flew away through the help of the hand glider, his heart mourned for the place which had given him shelter, luxury, and a sense of peace. It was the first time in years he had slept on a comfortable bed and had felt clean after taking a hot shower. The hotel had truly been heaven for him. But despite the losses he had incurred, Oliver had made sure to fill his backpack with everything important. He had food, seeds to grow plants again, clothes, medical supplies, toiletries, and whatnot. No matter where he landed, he would find another place to turn into his home, and he would be steadfast in work and resilient in nature, and he would make sure to make the best out of the situation. The hotel had been pure luck, and Oliver could be lucky again. Even if he wasn't, he was still brave and smart, and he knew and understood the apocalypse and the mind of the zombies. The hand glider kept flying into the night sky, taking him over the city as the wind whipped his hair. The city was a graveyard beneath him, the streets filled with zombies while the buildings faced total destruction. But Oliver was not going to look back again. He was only looking forward, towards the unknown horizon spreading out before him. He didn't know where he was going to land or what he would find there, but he was a survivor, and he was ready to stay alive with the hope of a new tomorrow. He disappeared into the night, his silhouette fading against the stars. The winds carried him away, leaving silent in its wake. His ears were still ringing from the sounds of the explosions in the hotel, but he knew safety waited for him up ahead. Perhaps not long-lived safety, but it was going to be safety all the same. The zombies were still there, and they were going to stay, but Oliver had himself to count on, and he was not one to give up.